All right, all right, all right. I think we're good here, Tom. Good morning, Tom. Hoping everybody is good. How are you doing, brother?
Good. How are you, my guy?
I'm
How's
good. I'm
everything?
I'm good, man. I'm chilly, a little thrown off by this time change, but here we are, man. Let's walk through this book.
No problem. Let's get it going.
Let's
You
get
wanna
it
you wanna
going.
start us off?
Yeah, man. So this week we read The Midnight Library, which is a big change of pace from the last couple weeks. We've been like stuck on this kind of like mindset book vibe. So it was just nice to read one of these books. And essentially, Midnight Library was about somebody, this woman who she was feeling like really down and out about her life. She was like just not content with the decisions that she's made, how she felt unimportant to people and things of that nature. And she wanted to take her life. And she went down this journey while trying to take her life, where she got to, decide like maybe my life would have been better or could have been better given different perspectives. So I was really interested in the book. I really enjoyed like just I guess like the thought process, right? It's just like what if kind of vibe from the book. How about yourself, man? How did you feel about it? Anything interesting, anything that caught your eye, like right off the rip?
So no, I kind of agree. The whole notion of the what if, like you said, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
as though in life everyone kind of goes through those moments and think, oh, what if I did this instead of that, or what if that happened instead of this, or if I made this choice, what would the result be?
Mm.
Reading through it and kind of going through how the main character got to experience her what if situations kind of made I don't know if you read these kind of books back in middle school or high school where you would read it and at the bottom of the page it'll give you like decisions and it'll be like, oh, do you follow the rabbit, if so go to page 58, or
Oh.
do you turn back, and it'll tell you to go to page like 112. And
Mm.
basically like you could flip through the book basically based on how your decisions while reading the book changes the ending or what potential ending you get in the story. You know what I mean? So this book kind of gave me a lot of those kind of vibes without the conscious decision of as the reader to kind of flip through and pick the scenario yourself. But that's what it kind of gave me. Or like even a video game when you're playing like a first person MMO kind of game where you like do certain things and make certain choices, like it affects the outcome of the game.
Mm.
And that's what this book kind of realistically, I think this what this book kind of like highlighted. It's different decisions can lead to different moments in your life, and you ultimately either regret it reflecting back, or you might actually, be glad you didn't make that decision reflecting back. And I think one of the main messages I got from the book was reflection. Because hindsight's 2020.
Mm.
Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree.
Because
Yeah.
Yeah, because all of the situations the main character. So the main character's name is Nora.
Mm-hmm.
So all the situations Nora found herself in at the beginning of the book, it was basically she was at a dead end job where she didn't realize her full potential. She wasn't living up to her dreams, and she was just like basically moving along. Keep kind of how like people do today. Realistically, everyone's just going about the motions.
Yeah.
And at certain points, she's like, "Oh, I wish I pursued swimming," because when she was younger, she was touted as a swimming like prodigy and
Yeah.
like an Olympian type character. And she was just like, "Oh, what if I pursued that and continued down that journey, or what if I really pursued music and went down that way?" And she constantly flips it back and forth between that. And I want to ask you this: do you think, even if when we're reflecting, do you think there's always that inner dialogue, something that always constantly makes us either regret something? Do you think we will innately as humans always regret something we've done?
I think so. Yeah, it's like a bad habit, man. It's like you said, innate,
Hmm.
right? Doesn't matter how good your people have like great lives and they still say, oh, like I regret this or I should have done this differently, or like we're so busy living in the past and in the future, but
Hmm.
not focusing on the
Never
present
in the
most
present.
times. Yeah, most
Right.
times, man. I don't know why that is. I do feel like no matter like who it is that we speak to, who it is that we see or experience, like we do experience that together though, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And it's interesting because I do it a lot sometimes. Me and my buddy used to back when we were graduating, right when we graduated college, we'd go on like rides up to North Jersey and we'd just hang out. We'd talk about that a lot. where he'd go, if I decided to just go to a different place, we wouldn't be friends. We wouldn't be taking this drive right now. We wouldn't be where we were. And the question came up to be like, it was, do you ever think about that? And my answer was obviously, I always think about that what if situation. And there's so many, I guess you could say, pivotal moments in your life where you
Mm,
make a certain decision, and like that moment can honestly dictate where the trajectory or where the future possibly could go. You know what I mean?
mm.
In terms of, I guess, high school to college, determining which college you go to, could be a pivotal moment. Determining, what major you want to take, or if you want to switch your major, where do you want to start your career? Like, there's so many different, I guess, choices in life, and it's inevitable that you're going to ask yourself, especially. Okay, let me ask you this: do you think we start to regret things when things are going bad, or do you think people will just constantly reflect back and say, "Oh, what if I did this instead, even if things are going fine?" What do you think?
It may be a combination of both. Just thinking of like my own experiences, sometimes it's because things are not going the way I anticipated, right? So now I'm
Uh huh.
looking back like, oh, like, man, when I was at this crossroad, like I could have just turned left instead of right and I would have been somewhere better off, right? Like that's one example of
Hmm.
like when things are going bad. But then also there are times where it's like maybe you regret you're feeling regret because of like memories or something. Like, I don't like, let's think of like a past relationship or something. You're like, oh, like I could have done this better. I could have been more understanding. I could have been whatever the case may be. So I don't know. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe it's just like based on what you're going through and experiencing at the moment. But for
Hmm.
sure, like I feel like people have regret when they are going through tough times. They're like, man, like I should have never did this, did that, did the third. Where in reality, like it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. You did it, right? You just learn from your mistakes. I don't know. How about you? Do you feel like maybe we dwell because of the negativity on the current like journey that we're on, or is it the opposite, the latter?
So, I mean, I'd add a third option to that, maybe. Curiosity. I think
Mm.
curiosity is something that really plays into that.
Mm-hmm.
The whole notion of what could have happened, and you start thinking about, people you could have met, opportunities that may or may not have arisen, and then depending on how creative your imagination really is,
Yeah.
I think that plays into it. Because for me personally, I don't really think I regret any of the decisions I've made, just because I'm of the mindset of I made that choice consciously, and no one ever forced me to make any choice, so I
Mm.
can't. It's hard to regret a choice you made yourself, knowing and willingly. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I don't tend to regret things, and I don't like to regret things just because of hindsight's 2020. So you're going to inevitably regret everything if you think with that mindset. But for me, I think more so it's curiosity. It's the what if again. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what if I did this? How would that have affected everything? Not because I don't like or I'm displeased on where things are currently. It's just, oh, I kind of just wondered where I would end up, who I would have known. Perfect example. Going through college, when I had to decide where I wanted to go to college, it was either staying local, going to Rutgers Camden, or going to TCNJ. I was in a situation. I got into a car accident about 3 weeks before I was going to decide where I was going to go.
Oh shit.
And what? Yeah, ultimately I came out fine, but my little brother got a little jacked up from it, right? And that was a kind of moment for me. I went, wow, do I really want to get into a car accident and then say, fuck it, I'm leaving. I'm gonna go somewhere else and live my life in a different way, or do I want to stay local, kind of like, still hang out around, kind of be some sort of role model and kind of try to make up for the mistake I made, you
Yeah.
know? And that's a perfect example of where it leads us today. Like, if I consciously said, fuck it, like, let me go live my own life, let me go away for college and do whatever I want to do, my brother could have probably resented me for it, or in this situation, I would have never met you, and this whole thing that we're doing right now probably would have never transpired. So it's interesting for me. I like to think of the possibilities of what could have and might have happened,
Hmm.
and I think it's genuinely that. Not all people have that genuine curiosity to wonder what could have happened in an alternate reality, but that's just me and my odd conspiracy theory mind thinking of potential things that happen. Uh, what about you? Have you ever wished? Okay, here's a good question to play on this. Right? Would you rather be able to go back in time, right, to any moment you so choose that you know was a pivotal moment in your life and change your decision, or would you rather go into the future and see all your past decisions that led you up to that point?
Is there a third option? um,
Nah, I mean, if
I
you get creative and think of one, sure.
I would. I don't think like when people give me the option. If I really had the option, I don't think I would go back. And the reason why I don't think I would go back is very similar to Nora in the story. Is when she's seen all these like different versions of herself based on like you know that was like kind of like going to the future, so to speak, right? Because she would open
Right.
up a book and it would be like a new marriage in a new location with new friends. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like going to
Hmm.
the future. But I feel like I resent going backwards because I really don't like looking back and feeling regret and
Hmm.
feeling like, oh shit, I could have did this, did that, the third. So maybe the latter is the answer. Going to the future would
Hmm.
be better because then you can kind of see like, oh, like how did I get here? Just like Nora, she was like, how did I marry this man,
Right.
or how did I end up going to this owning this pub with this guy, and now he's being like an
Hmm.
asshole, right? Whatever the case may be.
Right.
Yeah. So how about you? Like, would you, if you given the option, would you go back or would you look forward and kind of look back, on your journey?
I think I'd go. So okay, I guess it comes with a caveat. If you go forward, can you still go back to your present, right?
Yeah.
Because if you could go backwards, if you can go forward then back to the present time, I'd definitely do that because you get to go forward and figure out all the things that happened, what choices that you made, and then potentially make a different choice going
Hmm.
back. But see, the issue with going forward, so I would go backwards, right?
Okay.
Because the issue with going forward is there's just too much there's too many variables, right? Depending on how far forward you go, right? There's just too many situations or moments in your life that you have to reflect and look back on and then honestly remember. If you move 20 years in the future and you come back 20 years in the past, you got to remember that span of 20 years and kind of if you liked your life in 20 years from now, right? You got to make sure you fucking do everything spot the fuck on to end up in that place you were, right?
Mm.
So I think I'd rather go back to a point, especially where I had like option A and option B,
Okay.
right? And go back and change something just to see how different it would lead me. But I got a perfect example, law school.
Hmm.
Realistically, like part of me wonders, if I went to try to apply to more law schools and if I went to a law school in a different area, what would my law career be like right now? You know what I mean? Would it still be in the same position it is? Would I be practicing in New Jersey, New York, some random state like Wyoming, or like you know what I mean? Like that kind of situation where it's a clear 1A, 1B kind of choice, and either way doesn't affect your future as much, but there's still it's a slight deviation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I would do.
As we're speaking about this, there's two things that come to mind. I'm a big movie person, right? So
Uh huh.
have you ever watched the first one? Maybe you haven't watched, but it's called Black Mirror. You familiar with Black Mirror?
I'm not a big movie guy.
Okay, cool. So Black Mirror is like this series of shows where the ideas are kind of out there, right? Very futuristic show,
Okay.
very like every episode's different. But they had a movie where on Netflix, it may still be on there. Maybe you could catch it one of these days. But you, as the
I'm gonna check
viewer,
right now.
can choose what happens during the movie.
Okay.
So as we're going through this movie, you literally, like Tom, can choose on the remote, oh, like cuss my boss out, or oh, like
Hmm.
stay quiet and just swallow your pride, whatever the case may be. It's pretty interesting. So if you haven't looked into that, cool. Look into it in the future. But another movie maybe you're familiar with is Click with Adam Sandler.
Yes.
Great movie, right? Very like similar to what we're talking
Funny.
about. Could you go
Yep.
back? Could
Yep.
you go forward? There's tears, bro. That was like tear jerking movie from beginning to end,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But my point is, it
Hmm.
brings it brings me like it brings up memories of that movie because, like you said
Right.
earlier, would I go back or go forward? When he goes forward, the caveat is that he doesn't get to live through the stuff that he lives through, right?
That's true.
Yeah, it's like okay, we're like, and he's like, well, what happened? Like, I hit the button, and
Hmm.
next thing you know, it's like my kids are grown, they're getting
I'm
married,
here.
and they
Hmm.
hate me, and whatever the case may be. So
Right.
it's just crazy, like when I think about stuff like that, because that kind of stuff it has the same connotation. Stay in the present, right? Don't get too caught up with
Hmm.
what happened in the past, and don't get too caught up with what would be or what would be if I chose this, that, and the third. I don't know. It's like I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I just feel like me personally, it's so embedded in my head just to like enjoy today, Enjoy today
Hmm.
because really, I don't know if tomorrow's available for me. And yesterday's in the past,
Right.
right? So what am I dwelling on? Like, bro, there's a lot for me to regret, you know. But at the end of the day, it's like, come on, like, I don't want to stress out about that stupid shit, you know. I just want to live my life,
Yeah.
man,
No, I agree.
comfortably. Um, and then thinking about the future too much, I get jammed up too. It's very great to like reflect
Hmm.
and look forward, but you get jammed up too. You jam up
Yeah, because you
your
right.
energy, so to speak.
You kind of get stuck really thinking about like, whoa, what am I gonna do 3, 4 years down the line, 2 years down the line? How should I
Mm-hmm.
move? It basically like pre-planning your steps on how to achieve a certain goal that isn't really there yet. You know what I mean? And it's good because you don't want to venture into the dark without like some sort of light or like a candle or a flashlight or some guidance, or like you don't want to go on a road trip without a map. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so it's good and it's bad. I don't know. I find the whole theory of time traveling and going forward and backward a very interesting concept, just because kind of like what you were mentioning with click and just using the whole, if you jump forward too far you don't know what happens in between, right? And the same instance of, because when you travel to the past you can't stay in the past, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
inevitably a point in time where you have to go back to the present, and it's almost the same kind of issue. You know what I mean? You can go back to a point in time, do whatever you do, change the future, right? And then jump to the present, and next thing you know, your actions only changed, maybe a year's worth of events, and something still managed to happen, which either put your present in the same position or a worse position, and you
Mm.
don't know what's going on. And in that particular moment, what the fuck are you supposed to do, right? Are you supposed to go back and figure it out, or
Right,
do you
right.
live through it? You know.
Hmm.
So it's time travel is an interesting being,
Hmm.
and I have no doubt in my mind that if we are able to travel in time, like shit would be fucking wild.
Well, all right. Let's. I mean, I know you've seen like some images, right? I don't know. Photoshop's great, so I can't like claim it's true or not true. But there are definitely images
Right.
in time where, like, yo, somebody like had a phone, like a full fledged phone,
Uh
in this
huh. Uh
image
huh.
when it was like clearly like pre-phone era, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, or
Right.
just instances like that where it's like, I don't know, man, is time travel really like a thing or not? I don't know. I'm a conspiracy theorist when it comes to that because I'm so open to shit, bro.
I love that stuff.
Yeah,
I
I'm
love
so
that
open to
stuff.
it.
Cause like,
I don't write it off at all. You know what I mean? Because it's like I don't really know.
no,
Do
yeah,
you really know? Right? Like, who knows?
no. It's an interesting paradigm, right? Because part of me wants to say, especially with the images, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's again, Photoshop is even better than it was, 2 weeks ago.
Right.
It's just it's hard to believe what you see, but it's also hard to discount the unexplainable, right? You can't explain what you don't understand, right? And you can't just say everything's Photoshop like that. At a certain point, it's just too real to be like, well, that's fake. But it's interesting. It's really interesting because there's a perfect example. Here's an example. I know on YouTube they have videos of people who escape near death situations, right? And whether it be by, it looks like them stopping right before something falls, or like it looks like they fell or something pushed them, or like somebody warns them or something, right?
Hmm.
A part of me wonders, like, do you think that, like, some people say, oh, it's your guardian angel looking out for you or whatever, whatever. Or what if that's like your future self, right? Preventing something from happening because he knows like something else is gonna, like, what, like that whole dang, what's that one movie? It reminds me of some movie where dudes just kept on going back in the past and trying to fix shit, and like they just kept on going. I can't remember the movie off the
Source
top of my head,
code.
but
Source code.
I don't I don't know what it's fucking
Okay.
fucking it'll come to me eventually.
Well, got you. Got you. Got you.
But it's just
Yeah.
it's interesting to think that what if we're stuck in a continuous loop, right? What if like the future us is always here with the present us, because our present self is our past self, right? And it's just they're always looking out for us to make sure we get to where they need us to get, right?
Hmm.
What if that's like a thing? Like, let's
Uh,
bring Seth back into this. What if Seth is the future being and he's whispering in our ear? Like, our future self is like chirping in our ear.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, driving our subconscious to make certain decisions. Um, I actually have a funny anime reference to this exact thing. So I don't know if you're not super into anime, but if you're
Hmm.
like into anime TikTok right now, and like the anime reels that are going out. So Attack on Titan, I don't want to really spoil it for anyone, but Attack on Titan is some of the memes that are coming out are basically kind of reiterating that point of your future self talking to your present or past self, and
Mm,
it's driving and dictating, the future to be the way it wants to be. And it's funny that comes to mind in this exact same conversation
yeah.
because like it's interesting, right? Who says your subconscious isn't you, the future you, kind of like guiding you to where it wants you to be, or he wants you, or she, or whatever it may be, right?
Hmm. I don't write stuff like that all the time. I may not say I 100% agree with any of it, but I'm not the one to say it doesn't exist and it's not possible. Because realistically,
I
I've
agree.
seen and experienced things that I cannot explain. If I were to explain, you'd be
Hmm.
like, "That's not possible." But I've lived it, so it's
Right.
like um, it's funny that you say that because I was gonna bring Seth Speaks back into the mix too, but I wanted to
Hmm.
bring it on another level, right? Like the perspective I wanted to bring was Nora mentioned, or Mrs. Elmer, which was the librarian, her librarian,
Right. Right.
she kept bringing up the fact that these are all alternate lives of
Hmm.
hers, right? So, like, these are all, like, basically parallel lives. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's
Hmm.
just this is the possibility that it would have been if you'd taken road B versus road A. And I
Hmm.
feel like sometimes in life, it's hard to think that maybe that's not the case because like we get deja vu all the time. Like, why would we get deja vu if we've never seen or experienced an event, right? Like, why does it feel like, yo, I get deja vu all the time where I'm like, man, I've lived through this before. Like, I've definitely
Right.
experienced this, but I can't explain like where, when, or why, right? Like, it's almost like
Hmm.
my eyes have seen it, but my body can't recognize where or when it's from. So I don't
Hmm.
know what people describe deja vu as, like scientifically or medically, whatever the case may be. But when I think of it, I think maybe we've experienced that before. We've dreamt of it, or maybe we've just literally have been in this position before in a parallel universe, so to speak, right? And I don't want to sound like
Hmm.
fried or like or out there like real crazy because I'm not. But in the end of the day, how can I tell you yes or no when it comes to that if I feel it so
Right.
much? Like I feel it, like I've been here. You know what I mean? Like me and you could be talking right now. And I'd be like, oh, like I've experienced this, not because we've been talking before, but
Hmm.
maybe it's like the clothes that we're wearing, the image behind your image, right? Like I don't know. There's
Right.
just little
No, it's
cursors that make
something.
me feel I've definitely lived this before.
Hmm.
You know?
It's funny that you mentioned that because you're about to open a whole. I guess the more and more we do these kind of things and read through these books, we open up a ton of worms.
Mm-hmm.
But so generally, I think it's basically the Mandela effect. You've heard of the Mandela effect, right? It's
Mm-mm.
basically so I forget the exact context of why it's called the Mandela effect, but you know who Nelson Mandela is, right?
I do. I do.
Right. So I forget the exact context of where the name came up, but it was a situation where part of the world basically believed Nelson Mandela was either in jail or dead, and the other part of the world was like, no, Nelson Mandela is out alive doing X, Y, and Z. I forget the exact parallel, but it was basically a situation where half of the people were like under one impression, and the exact other half of the people were under a completely opposite impression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is interestingly enough, there is a filter on I've done it on Instagram where it's basically it'll put up two images of the same thing. It's like two logos basically. Like it'll be two Target logos. And it's like, well, which one's the Target logo? And you for sure like, oh, like it's definitely this one. I swear this is what it looks like. But it turns out you're wrong, right? So going on the idea of parallel universes, right? The issue I have with that is it's hard to say we've lived through a moment already because by very nature, parallel universes run parallel to each other, right?
Mm.
It's kind of hard for a moment to happen, here, and then you experience it here. Like it's kind of so it's like backtracked like that. So it's kind of hard to explain it and think of it in that sense. But how I see it is this is how I see the whole parallel universe paradigm, and I think it's been explained like this. It's when you're doing something and at a certain point in your life, right? Everyone has the same starting point and it'll go, and then at each point where you make a pivotal decision in your life, you branch off. And but that line where you first made the decision keeps going forward, as in you made the other choice, right? So again, I guess in your sense, you can feel like you've experienced something in the future but at the present, or like vice versa. Because say if you make a choice somewhere down the line that kind of breaks off and has a kind of intersects with the current line that's running, you can probably have that kind of same exact experience. But I find that the theory of parallel universes probably 100% exist.
Mm.
I just think it does.
Yeah.
Right? There's again too many unexplainable things in life to discount it. Well, given the fact that we haven't lived through it, done it, or anything, but it makes too much sense, right?
Mm.
It just makes too much sense because at certain points in time where things can change, and like you said, deja vu. It's like you feel like something's happened before, or the whole notion of doppelgangers, right? But basically, you are yourself. You basically see someone who's exactly like you in some random way, somehow, in some sense, and it's you know that's not you, but you clearly see them. You're like that looks like me. Like, is that me? You know what I mean? And it's just it's fascinating, right? Because if that's the case, right, and if everyone can kind of diverge paths when they cross and meet, that just means the possibilities of the universe are just generally endless, right? Like things can just cross and go and run in various directions, and there's almost no there's no same story, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost virtually impossible. And that opens up the whole how do you travel from one timeline to another timeline, and how you kind of um, venture between things, kind of like what Seth says. Once you're above yourself, right? You're a higher being, and you've obtained this higher level of consciousness, right? Is when you can start seeing all of this happening, and you can kind of decide where you want to interject and kind of go into and see how it all affects each other.
Hmm.
It's nutty, bro. Like this whole shit. Like this is definitely one of those conversations. If you get super fried or something, like this is one of those
Mm-hmm.
things we could take. We could probably ran off for 2 hours on this about something not relevant to the book. Although it is relevant to the book, right?
Yeah,
Because
it
each
is.
each time she enters the Midnight Library, she basically ventures into a different life in a different timeline, and it's her based off of decisions she's made in the past, right?
Yeah.
So this whole notion of alternate realities is the best way to put it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then honestly, with VR, like with how like virtual reality and technology is really starting to allow us to venture into something we've never thought we'd be able to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like kind of fuzz the lines between reality. What says that's not like that's you living in the present and in whatever situation you are. You're living basically in two situations at two different times. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, dude, that was a fun running tangent, but
Hmm.
it's fucking nuts. Here, let me ask you this question: Would you want to be in Nora's position? Would you ever want to enter the Midnight Library?
No.
Okay.
I feel the reason why is because I mean I guess in the sense of the book, yes, and the reason why is because in the sense of the book, it was there not just a happy ending? Like, was it not just okay? She decided I wanted to live, and that was the point, right?
Right. Yeah.
Whereas
The
if
whole general point. Right.
yeah, right, like that's the point. The point is that she understood and maybe transformed her perspective into something where now she appreciates her life because she realizes maybe some of those lives in the Midnight Library were better in a sense in regards
Mm-hmm.
to like okay these decisions were different compared to current life, but they didn't all have the outcome that she wanted, right? There was one where she was just like feeling horrible, like I told you, the one that stuck out to me was when she finally married the guy that
Mm-hmm.
she like dropped off 2 days before the wedding. They bought the bar that he wanted, the pub, and she was just
Mm-hmm.
not happy with who he was. She was like, who is this person? Then there was another one where
Right.
like her and her brother were getting along, and
Mm-hmm.
they were making money together. She was like a professional speaker after having this great like swimming career. And
Right.
I guess my point is the book showed ups and downs, not just like this fairy tale
Mm-hmm.
where everything is great. And she,
Mm-hmm.
given that information, was still content with what she had currently. Which remember in the beginning of that, she did not want her life anymore, right? So
Right.
it's like I really like that perspective. So to bounce back to what you asked me, like would I do the same on the perception of the book, like based on how the book was perceived? I would. In real life though, it's like, damn, if I'm down and out like that, like if I'm at the point where I just don't want to survive this life anymore, probably not, man. Like just, you know what I mean? Just take it
Right.
away from me. But it's unfortunate because, as we're laughing and joking about it, I'm sure there are people who feel, like
Mhm.
maybe this life is just not the life that they anticipated or wanted to have when they were growing up or whatever the case may be. And it's unfortunate
Mhm.
because life is pretty precious, man. Like people go left and right,
I agree.
whether they want to or not. And for you to just say, "Hey, I don't want this life anymore," it's a little unfair. Um,
Mhm.
Granted, it's a personal decision, but it's a little unfair to everybody else who wants life, right? To the people who
I
like
agree.
aren't able to have the life that you have. It's just unfair. Yeah.
Oh, I feel no, I feel that. Like a thing that I kind of sit on is I remember watching this YouTube video of I forget which, I think it might be the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, where a lot of people jump off to commit suicide, right?
Hmm.
And inevitably everyone who jumps off kind of dies, right?
Yeah.
And the I remember the video I watched was a guy actually was who contemplated suicide jumped off the bridge, right?
Mm.
And in the moment of jumping off the bridge, you know that the whole notion of your life like flashes before your eyes,
Mhm.
right? And as he jumped off, and as he was content, and he's like, I'm ready to die, I'm going to die, I hate everything that's going for me. And as he's jumping off, plunging to his death, he goes, oh shit, I don't want to die, right? And I wonder, it's kind of hard to tell, right? It's kind of hard to ask the person, like, oh, at that point, did you flash back and go, actually, I want to live, right? Because inevitably, at a certain point, you're too deep in, and it's like you can't avoid death at that point, right?
Yeah.
But some people miraculously do. So my question is, do you think at a certain point, like the people who survive, right? Like, is that because of an uncanding willingness to want to continue living just spurs
Mm.
them on, and they realize this wasn't for me, and it's other beings in nature kind of taking its course and making sure you survive, or it's in that point they have actually inevitably given up and they're like, yes, this was the right decision for me, as they're plunging to their death. Like, what do you think?
It's hard to tell, man. I
It's
Okay.
it's a hard question, right?
So let me give you an example of maybe the closest I've been to maybe that decision, which is skydiving.
Hmm.
When I went
Okay.
skydiving, you're kind of in too deep once you're up there, right? Like once you're up there, you're in the
Hmm.
plane, you're strapped up to the person. It's kind of like, yo, like I can't just fly down. They give you an option. They say, hey, like you could just fly down if you feel like it's not for you. Like just, I'm like, man,
Hmm.
mama ain't raised no bitch. Like we here though, we gonna do it. So
Right.
at the point where you're like standing and they don't even like, I don't, I remember if I'm not mistaken, they don't let you look down. What happens is like they
Hmm.
say, okay, turn your back, and then you jump
Hmm.
backwards, right? So my
Okay.
point in saying that is I feel like that's the moment, that's the crossroad where you either say, hey, this is really what I wanted to do, or no.
Hmm.
But once
Right.
you get to that point, it's too late. At that
Right.
moment where I was already like my back turned, I knew there was no like, okay, like I can't do this, guys. I can't do this. No, it was like, yo, we're here. We're jumping. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna
Right.
hurt somebody. So
Right.
similar to like the question you asked, I feel like maybe at that point, regardless if they wanted to or not, if they had the realization, oh shit, maybe I want to live, it's too late. They're too deep. And then you said
Hmm.
like, okay, well, if
Yeah.
they survive, like, did the world maybe protect them or something? I think that's just chance. When you say like,
Okay.
there's so many possibilities,
Yeah.
maybe it's
No,
just chance. Like,
that's true.
because so many people jump that bridge and so many people pass away, right? So, like,
Hmm.
how could I jump and survive? I'm the one person who survived by jumping the same bridge that so many people have, like, given their life to.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if it's chance. I can't argue that it's not. I can't argue that it's not like some higher
Right.
being trying to protect them, or maybe like you said, like guardian angels or whatever, man. Whatever it is that you believe in.
Yeah, it's a hard question to really kind of like contemplate, because then there's so many people who inevitably pass away by forces unbeknownst to anyone, right?
Exactly.
And it's kind of hard to say like, oh, it was their time, like, oh, it's somebody operating under some other guise doing what needed to be done. Like, it's kind of hard to tell. And then again, to your point, where it's kind of unfair, right? It's kind of unfair to everyone around them, for not to like fucking beat up on people who like are contemplating it at all, but there is a sense of unfairness, because there are a certain amount of people out there who inevitably pass away before their time, right?
Yeah.
Before they even realize it, unbeknownst to themselves, like unbeknownst to anyone else, like it just happens. And it's kind of hard sometimes to say like you want to make the conscious decision to end your life and just and call it quits basically, right?
Yeah.
And it's but again, it is your own decision, and it's like you don't live those. You aren't in those person's shoes to understand how hard it's been, how tough it's been, right?
Mhm.
A very common thing. I think in Asia it's fairly common. Being bullied, right?
Mm.
A lot of youth commit suicide because they're being bullied to the extreme, and they don't have anywhere to go and anyone to turn to, right? And I mean, even in our situation, it's kind of in the same sense, it's once you kind of hit a point. I think Nora is a good example of what happens with generally us in our age, I guess, because Nora was 34 when she decided to commit suicide in the book. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like you hit that quarter life, midlife crisis situation where you just don't know what to do, and regret starts building and questions start coming in. And if you're already banged up and beat up, it only takes a little bit of anxiety to really push a person off the edge, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's nuts to really think about that notion and concept. But
Yeah.
to circle to my original question though, I think I'd do it. Right? I would like because you think about it, it's the example I gave of somebody's life flashing before their eyes, right? In a sense, that midnight library was her life flashing before her eyes. She saw
Mm.
all the things she missed out on, right? All the chances she could have made, all the what ifs. She got to experience the what ifs, right? And then she made the realization that, I'm fine. I'm happy. This is what I wanted to be. I'm actually content. Like I'm glad I didn't make those choices. Or like those choices weren't the right decision to begin with, and that's why I didn't make them, right? I didn't do anything wrong. And it's kind of I think the Midnight Library is who's who are we to say that the Midnight Library doesn't happen, right? When your
Yeah.
life is flashing before your eyes, who says that doesn't happen, right? You enter this weird psychological state of mind where you get to experience everything that's ever happened to you in real time, right? Because
Mm.
people say like videos of people who escape near death situations or who basically die and become resuscitated and come back to life, they experience this out of body kind of experience, and they see their life flash before their eyes. They feel it's like they hear people around them. They experience something completely otherworldly. And who says like that's not something people don't experience, right? Who says people don't run down memory lane and just remember all the good times, the bad times, the what ifs, and this, that, and the third, and go, I'm kind of happy with how everything turned out, right?
Mm.
And next you know they're back or they die or however it is. This as I say this and talk about this again, if you don't already know, I'm very into anime,
Mhm.
and there was actually a I don't want to spoil it because it's actually a good anime, and I'm reading the manga on it, and at a certain point, one of the main characters throughout the first 80% of the story, he dies, right?
Mhm.
And at the moment he dies protecting a friend, right? And he looks back on his life and he doesn't regret anything he's ever done, right? He doesn't regret any of the decisions he's ever made. He doesn't regret protecting his friend and dying in that
Mhm.
one moment. And he doesn't regret what's going to happen in the future because he's like, all right, buddy, like, take care of business for me. And he passes away and goes and he sees his girlfriend in heaven who inevitably passed away before him and everything. And it's funny, that whole anime and story is actually about time travel. So
Okay.
it's actually an interesting parallel in this
Mm.
context
Got you.
where where I'll give a little background to that. The guy who inevitably passed away, the main character went back in time to save him, right? Because his death triggered something that happened in the present. And in order to prevent that situation from happening in the present, the main character goes back in the past to prevent this one character from dying, right? Full circle, dude fucking dies anyway, and it's just like a whole big hoopla and crazy situation. Which goes to show that even if you had the ability to change the past, right? Go into past and change it, there might be things in life or in a person's like story, right? who, if there's a higher being writing someone's story, there might be points in that person's life where they will die before X point in time, yada yada yada, and it's just no way around it. Which is kind of I think draws a good parallel to Nora, right? There's a reason why certain decisions weren't made, and there's certain reasons. So like how the Midnight Library works for anyone who's listening is if she was in the life that she chose and she decided that, oh, this is the life I wanted, I enjoy this life, she got to stay in that life, right? She doesn't get any memories of what got her to that point. She's Nora of today inserted into this life and replacing current life, that current life's Nora, right? And if she enjoys how everything works, she gets to stay forever, right? And Midnight Library closes, it's done and over. But if she doesn't like it, she gets to return, right? So in that sense, I lost my train of thought. It was going somewhere. I had something in my mind, and it was going somewhere, and I couldn't remember what it was. There's a point, but um, I know. I guess the point was even if you make one choice and one door opens, right, it doesn't mean all doors are closed, kind of situation. And when one door shuts, it doesn't mean another door opens, kind of. It's that kind of decision making process. And it's like you mentioned earlier, it's good because when she inserted into a new life, it showed her the ups and downs of everything, right? It wasn't all peachy perfect. Like
Mhm.
every decision she's ever made, right, has its flaws. And I think that's a moral of the story, right? Every decision you make in life has a positive and a negative. You can't
Mm.
just harp on the positive or the negative too much. It just puts you in this conundrum. But
I
yeah,
think
man, I'd like to hear some off-wall thoughts from you, dude. I've been talking out my ass this whole time.
I just think it's interesting, man. Like none of this is for certain, right? And actually, one of our
Right.
viewers, Melly, she's saying that she said that the Midnight Library is like legit. She's experienced something similar, and it's like this is the kind of stuff I'm saying. I was saying from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. I was like, there are certain things that you experience as a person that no matter who you say, it just doesn't like who you tell. It doesn't. It may not resonate or it may not seem as real to them because they didn't experience it, right? Like I've prayed
Mm-hmm.
for things. I've prayed for things where it was like there's no way this was gonna happen. I've prayed for it, and it happened exactly how I prayed for it. So like now that
Right.
comes into question, like your faith and your belief system, right? Like I don't want to get into that because I'm very open. I feel like everybody has their own
Mm-hmm.
thing, but my point is those little nuances, those little decisions, those little thoughts, those little prayers, those little moments in your life that you like wished upon something and it was nearly impossible and it happened. Like how do you describe that, right? Or the very
Right.
opposite where you would never like for instance, like I've lost people who I would never expect to not see them grow old, and I lost them before
Mm-hmm.
like time came. So on I guess the opposite spectrum, it's like, well, I could have never wished for that. Why did this happen? And I find myself asking a lot of questions like that, like why do certain things happen in my life, and how am I to perceive them so that I can be the best person I can be? And every time I think
Mm-hmm.
about these books, right, whether it be the Midnight Library, Seth Speaks, Click, the movie, in the end of the day, there's somebody who created this, right? This entertainment, the movie, the book, whatever. I want to understand what the author is trying to portray of that piece of entertainment. Is it that they're trying to portray that maybe life is precious and that we should be living in the moment and appreciate the ups and the downs, such as like what Nora and the author of this book, The Midnight Library, in my opinion, I felt like the author was just trying to kind of like tease us with what if and try
Mm-hmm.
to like instill within us that, hey, man, it doesn't matter what if, right? There's good consequences, bad consequences. Just live your life, enjoy, and whatever happens, happens. Right? Like that's the kind of gist I get from all of these people who create these things. But I hope I'm perceiving it correctly because you and I may read the same book, watch the same movie from the same author, and have a completely different perspective based on what we've
Mm-hmm.
experienced. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No,
It's just
I
different.
think one thing that comes to mind when you describe that, right? It's actually a title of a Korean show, but like I think the line fits in very well here. With the moral of Midnight Library, it's okay to not be okay,
Mm.
right? And it's I think that's that at least that's what I portrayed the moral of this story to be, right? Like when you're down, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
all right to be down, right? Everyone inevitably feels low points in their life,
Yeah.
Like it's okay. Like we know you're not okay. You know you're not okay, but it's going to be okay, right? That whole notion, whether you believe it's a higher being putting you in that situation or, giving your trials, right? Like that's a very big thing. Like, oh, God or whomever, somebody is forcing you to undergo the most difficult trials you will ever undergo in your life today. Like this next span of a couple of months are going to really test your mind, your body, your soul, your being,
Mm.
right? And if you make it out, you or I think that's more really sometimes put bring it once you get out of the ring, you once you realize you can only be here for so long and it won't that always you're going to be fine. It's one of those very popular all the books we read, and a lot of stuff we read is having
You're breaking up a little bit on my end, Tom. I'm not sure if maybe it's like a mic. Maybe talk again. Yeah, super choppy at the moment. So I'm trying to listen. I'm not sure if it's maybe on my end or maybe on your end, but just a little choppy as you're speaking. So let me try to let's see. Maybe give it a moment. Yeah, he said breaking up on our
give it
end.
a moment. Yeah, he's breaking up on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Sound good now.
There you go. I fixed it.
All right, so if you want to run that back, bro, because I'm over here like I'm trying to listen. Just run it back real quick. Run it back real quick. The whole
I don't
idea.
even know. I don't know where I cut off on. I don't even remember the. So the whole notion of what was the last thing you got?
Just start. Run it back, bro. Run it back.
I guess the moral, like I said, the moral of Midnight Library realistically is being okay with basically getting beat
Oh,
up,
okay, okay. Yeah.
understanding understanding that it's there's going to be low moments in your life, and honestly, you're going to be put through the ringer and go through a lot of trial and tribulation,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately you're going to it's going to try you. It's one of those make or break moments,
Yeah.
right? And it's the moments that define you, and I think the book kind of is one of those those kind of moral stories. It's like this will define you if you can make it out alive kind of situation, right? It reminds me of do you know how like the notion of blacksmithing works, where how people create like swords and like
Yeah.
metal objects? So it's the curing process where basically you undergo high intense heat, you're hammered, you're smashed, you're basically put through the ringer, you're burned, you're beat, and you're battered and bruised, and at the end you come out a finished polished product, right?
Hmm.
So I think what the book really kind of is harping on, especially towards the end of it, where Nora basically realizes this is the life I want to live and I'm happy, right? I think the whole notion of you just have to realize that all the choices you made were inevitably made for a reason, and you're honestly feeling at a low point because you're in a low point because shit's happening to you, but you're also in a low point because you want to be in a low point, right? It's a mindset thing, right? If you think everyone's against you, it doesn't matter what happens, you're going to portray it as the world's against you. But the minute you kind of take a more positive approach and think like, okay, I'm just going through a rut and you'll get out of it, like I think that's a turning point. And I think that was the turning point for Nora as she started experiencing all these different lives. She realized, I'm glad I didn't do that. I would have hated this.
Mm.
And it goes to show that, to really fully understand something, you have to experience it. That kind of comes to mind. And I think that's what the book really highlights. What do you think?
Yes. Um. I agree. I think that is like the mindset that the book is trying to portray, and I like it. Like I like that advice for like us to consume and to take as a reader.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really do enjoy that. So I guess this is the difference, right? Whereas I like this conversation because some of the business books and the mindset books we read, it's not really up for interpretation as much as these kind of narratives. Whereas when we're reading these narratives, we can kind of draw our own assumptions, right? There's kind of like a baseline assumption that you can assume is true, but based on your thinking, based on our conversation and the questions we're asking each other, like it can really change the meaning of the book. So
Right.
like I just enjoy it in general, man. Whereas it's not kind of like, oh, you got to do A, B, and C to be successful. It's more like, okay, like here's the story, here's the narrative, kind of like how I told you like the Bible is, right? Like I really enjoyed when I went to the church and they would like preach the Bible because there's so many stories in there up for your interpretation, right? It's not really like anything else that I'm looking at other than the interpretation and how I'm understanding what it is that they're trying to preach to me. Like I really enjoy that. So similar to that, this book is like that for me. So I really I'm liking what he's putting down. I'm picking up what he's putting down. Yeah.
No, I agree because that's I think that's the biggest part of reading narrative books like this, right? It makes you really think about it makes you think about the what if.
Mm-hmm.
Full blown circle. I think that's what it really is. Because at any given point in time, Nora could have been like, "I fuck with this life. I'ma stay here." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I did this. Like, this is great. Right? It's um, it's one of those kind of situations where you can read through the story and kind of just think through it and go, I finally found myself like, oh, if I was in that situation, put into a life where it wasn't that bad, I might be say, fuck it, let's give this life a whirl,
Yeah.
right?
But who's to say you would like it, right? Like that's what I
Right?
kept thinking.
Yeah.
Who's to say she would like she's only there for a blip of time and that's what she has to base her experience off of, right?
Right.
So for me to say like, oh, like I would love to stay in this one. Like let's say for instance the one where she was a speaker and she had money, her brother was good, he wasn't like he was married and his spouse was treating him well. I think her dad might have been like her parents might have been divorced and married to somebody else. But aside from that, it seemed like that was the best plate given to her out of those books, in my opinion, unless I'm mistaken. But I want to say that was the one.
No, I agree.
And even given that, she was kind of like, no, like I'm okay, right?
Well, here's my question. Yeah, no, she was basically like, yeah, I don't fuck with this because I think it had something to do with her mother, like her memories of her mother and her mother dying, and it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of that kind of played a role. So this
Mm-hmm.
leads to my next question: what if every time you pick up a story, right, your memories are overwritten?
Mm.
Like you get to fully experience that life up to that point, right? Do you think that changes the story at all?
I think so because then you understand why you are who you are and where you are, right? Like it gives you
Right,
the guidelines versus just a picture or
right,
a snapshot. Yeah, for sure.
right. Yeah, no, I think that would have been a very interesting take and turn, right, in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Say if she enters a book, she has all the memories of that life, and she gets to live it for 48, 50, like 48 hours or something, right? And then at
Mm.
a point, she cuts back to her normal self, right? But she now has all these memories of this life and what she just experienced, and now her past memories are fucking ramming into her mind too, and she gets to decide: do you want to stay living this life, or do you want to like jump out and try again,
Yeah.
right? I think that would be a completely different kind of story, and that would actually be a lot more interesting to see how that dynamic changes, right? But something I had written down that I think kind of I wanted to ask you and think about, it's the notion of potential, right? Because at the beginning of the book, Nora is this decorated 11-year-old who's like on the fast track of being an Olympian, right? And they're saying she's a prodigy, she has so much potential. And fast forward into the book, the actual book, she hasn't lived up to that potential. And I think that really was the stigma that put her under, right? So do you think labeling people, right, as children with potential or people as prodigies, do you really think that can actually harm and stunt someone's development?
Yeah, I think if they can't live up to the challenge, they'll live in regret. They'll live in kind of like a you feel like it's a lot of pressure, right? So
Right.
you feel like you fell short. You feel like you fell short and you're constantly trying to reach that potential, that live up to your potential, so to speak. I think it makes or breaks people on both spectrums, right? You can really build a successful, hardworking, strong individual, or you can really hurt somebody where they feel like, I don't want to live this life no more because I didn't live up to my potential. It can cause really serious depression. And it's unfortunate because like when you look at like the Olympics and stuff, there's a lot of children involved, right? And like sometimes like you got to think like is this their dream or is it like their parents' dreams, the people around them to answer your question, right? So it's like it's a lot of pressure for some people, but for some people they live up to it too.
Right. So, okay, that spurs my next question. What is potential? What do you feel like? What would you define potential as? Like, because you put somebody in a situation, they're like, oh, like, look at you, you're a fast swimmer, right? You can be, it looks like you might be able to beat a record time, X, Y, and Z. Like, what makes you a prodigy? So, like, what defines potential?
I think like the consensus or society defines potential. Because as the individual, and I'm speaking like specifically of children, because when you get to an adult, maybe it's a different conversation. But like as a child, do you really understand what potential is? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you may know you're good at something, you may know you enjoy something, but you can't identify the potential within yourself. There has to be a group of people, a person, 1 to 2 people to say, hey, like this person has potential, right? Or a group of critics, a group of whatever, like what professionals acclaimed in that, accredited in that realm, whether it be boxing, swimming, law, whatever, right? Like, oh, like, do you have a potential? Is this a great potential lawyer, or is this a great potential boxer? Whatever the case may be, I think maybe there just needs to be somebody to label it that, because otherwise, like, I don't know. It's just like I don't know. It's just a feeling.
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of one of those situations. Basketball is a great example, right? Because you could be a very good basketball player and just be super fundamental and just not be that uber full of potential kind of guy, right? Perfect example. Not everyone's
Zion.
Zion, right?
Yeah.
Like not everyone has that sky high potential, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
guys who play like fucking Kyle Anderson, great example, fundamental, slow pace. I play basketball the way basketball should be played kind of guy. He's carved out a very good career for himself. Like those fundamental glue piece guys play basketball at their own speed, at their own pace, and what like they're the I guess would you say they're the outliers? Like the people who have this who develop the skill and work hard to it, are they the outliers compared to like the people with potential in like the sports athletics? Because I think this is where the context comes up the most.
I think once again, it's a decision that it's how you perceive it, right? So when we asked about potential, I said there's a person who's going to live up to the potential. There's a person who's going to basically succumb to the pressure. On the flip side, there's always somebody who's, oh, they suck. Like they're not as good as Zion, right? Let's just say they're not as good as this guy. So they're hungry. They can do one of two things. They can either accept that and say, hey, yeah, I do suck. I'm not good enough. Or really crush it, right? Think of like Ja Morant. Think of like, I don't know, just people who like maybe they weren't deemed the best in their class or whatever it is that they're being labeled for, but Tom Brady, great example, right?
Ball out. Right.
Exactly. So that's my point. I just feel like it just comes down to choices and how you like react to them, man. And similar to this book, it's very similar, right? They labeled her as having a lot of potential, but maybe that's why she felt so much resentment. She succumbed to that pressure, it seemed like, right? Because now she's not that accredited swimmer that they thought she would be.
And which is great because on the flip side, they gave her the choice to live that life, right? They let her experience that
Mm-hmm.
highly decorated life she really wished she lived up to. And she ultimately said, nah, this isn't it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad this wasn't it, right? And it's really interesting that, like, I think potential, the notion of potential is always a very fine gray, like, it's a fine line in a very gray area, right? Because, again, hindsight, you could say Tom Brady had all the potential in the world, right?
But nobody at the
Nobody,
time was saying
yeah,
it. Yeah, you
right.
know?
But exactly. So
Yeah.
do you go back and say like, there's always going to be that one beat reporter who had like some obscure record, and they go, yeah, like I said, Tom Brady was going to be the
Yeah,
GOAT.
yeah.
Like, yeah, there's always one, but it goes to show that this potential, this rating system, this grading scale, I think it's fundamentally flawed, and I think we as a society live up to it too much. Or
Yeah.
like tout it too much, right? I think it's fundamentally flawed, but it's our metric. It's the metric we use, whether it be grading people in academics or sports or in anything really, right?
Mm.
Like I feel as though you gauge people by their potential and how they fit in. Friends, finding out who you want to run in your friend circle. I feel as though people also great potential. Like, oh, do I potentially see you being my friend 5 years down the line? What do you bring to the table kind of situation, like that kind of notion. And I think it's a fundamentally flawed metric, but I think it's a metric that we all ultimately use, and I don't think there's a better metric for it yet. So
Yeah.
that's the issue.
Well, I guess when I'm thinking of it, I think the better metric is just to treat everybody fairly, man, right? Like just treat everybody with kindness and fairness, because in the end of the day, we all do. It's almost like a judgment system,
Right.
right? Like,
It's like a ranking system almost.
exactly, right? Because I can think of it like this: just because a janitor doesn't make as much money as a CEO does not mean that the janitor is not as good of a person, beneficial as a friend, or whatever the case may be, as a CEO, right? But if you look at the two, society would deem the janitor not as fit as a we know this is not true, right? Like if you judge them based on of their character, their morals, whatever the case may be, it's a very different story. But like you said, society definitely casts judgment on people based on their rank, right? Which is
Yeah,
unfortunate.
right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, another perfect example would be people who are college graduates versus people who are in the trades,
Yeah.
right? Making almost people in the trades could be working same amount of hours, making even more money than people like college degrees, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
flip side perception thing, right? And it's just, oh, if you went to school, or like that whole kind of notion. It's like, oh, if you went to school, how many more opportunities could you have gotten? Like, what could you have lived up to this potential, like, or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
It's I don't know. It's an interesting place. It's almost as interesting as the whole notion of parallel universes.
For sure, bro. It's funny. He's never gonna escape our mind, man. Seth.
He's not. Death is always there,
Yeah.
man. I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
That was an out there book, man, but it definitely it's stuck.
It
It's
was
stuck.
eye opening. I think he did what he sought out to do.
Yeah. All right, Tom. So we hit this hour mark. Is there any point that you maybe thought about or read through that you haven't hit yet? Maybe we should, give the viewers just that perspective. If not, then we can move on. But let me know.
I'm reading a quote I have written down. Right, it's from chapter 6. It says, "3 hours before she decided to die, her whole being ached with regret." Right, and I think that's back a throwback to what I said earlier. The minute you're about to take your life, or the minute you're about to do that life changing thing, your body reacts. Right, there's a point in time where you go, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't think this is it, but you're in too deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important for people to really realize and reflect, not reflect in a negative sense, but reflect in the sense that, you know, is this really the right choice? Can I possibly evaluate this a little bit more rationally? And I think that is the problem that a lot of us suffer nowadays, is the whole being rational about decisions we make, right? And I think the book really highlighted the rational nature of the irrational and rational nature of humans, right? And I think if we all kind of like what you've been harping on is living in the present, right? If you live in the present and don't think too far back and too far forward, you can make a more rational decision, even if up to that point you really want to take your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the one tidbit that I got from the book that I just
Got
wanted
you,
to
bro.
highlight.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. All right, man. Let's see. Would you recommend the book? Number one, first and foremost.
I would. I think so. I think more so for certain people than others. Like if you're really in a rut, like I feel as though this book is one of those books that if you're suffering from depression, or if you're somebody who has like bouts with depression, some sort of anxiety at points, I think this book really will resonate with you, right? And on the flip side, if you're always a positive, happy person, I think this book might not do too much for you. I think you might. There's going to be points where you find yourself a little bit more annoyed with Nora than you someone else might be. So
Hmm.
I think it's a 50-50. If you think you're too positive and overly positive and you can't see the downside and negative to things, don't read the book unless you got time. But if you're struggling at any point in your life, or where you're questioning anything, or you just feel like shit or bad or beat up, I think this book is one of those books that will really kind of pull you out the rut.
Hmm.
You'll be able to relate to it. And
Yeah,
I
for
think that's
sure.
the book. What
I'm
about you?
gonna 100% recommend. But to counter what you just said, I don't know if anybody realistically, as much as they may present themselves to be like super positive, I'm sure this book can help everybody. And the reason why I say that is because like I'm thinking to myself, is there any like person in this earth who is literally just positive and they haven't gone through anything or haven't experienced anything? So I don't know. They might be faking it, Tom. These people here, man. If y'all ain't going
No,
through something, man, I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know, because there's points in your life where like maybe things haven't happened
Sure.
yet, right?
You're
And
right.
you're
You're
like,
right.
everything. Like that's my point. If you're content with where everything is, having a book that tells you life kind of sucks and I'm about to go fucking kick the can,
Right, right.
like I don't think it's
Fair,
anything for
fair,
you.
fair,
The
fair.
thing. It's a moment to moment dependent kind of book.
Gotcha. I definitely recommend, man. I found it to be a great read. Just one of those eye-opening books compared to some of these like mindset business books that we read, where it's a little bit more direct with the information. This one was much more analytical. You draw from it what you would like to draw, and I think the conclusions that we drew, like you and I, like I would definitely recommend it, and hope that other people could draw the same conclusions.
Right.
So did you want to do the wheel? Did you want to? No, we're gonna do the Alchemist. We said.
Yes, we're gonna read the like we said earlier. I think we're gonna keep it on this narrative train and take a break from the overly abundant self help do A, B, and C formulaic type of book. So we're gonna read The Alchemist
Yes,
next,
sir.
and we're gonna derive what we can and have a very similar discussion and see where it takes it. And I think it'll be a good book to compare and contrast, right? Because we're gonna
Yes.
be living through the lives of a shepherd in The Alchemist. So we'll see how that kind of affects everything, and maybe it'll be a good segment next time on the next episode for us to kind of talk about how it relates to this book too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very excited, man. I've heard great things about this book. Like I think they teach this in schools, if I'm not mistaken, too. I just never ran across it in any of my courses, so I'm very excited, bro. Thanks for the talks today, man. Amazing, just dialogue between the two of us. Let's keep the train moving. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Guys, that was the Legacy Liftoff episode 10, the Midnight Library. See you guys on the next one where we read The Alchemist. Tom, I'm going to see you soon, brother. Have a good one.
All right, bro. Take care. All
Yes,
right,
sir.
everyone.